Today on the podcast, she is a rock and roll mama. I mean, literally a rock and roll mama. I have Korey Cooper of Skillet with us. Korey, thanks so much for being on today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Okay, so some of my listeners are going to be so fangirling knowing that you're on. Some of my listeners, they're maybe not so much the rock and roll kind of hard stuff. So
maybe be scared if they see a picture of me. Who knows?
Or inspired. So tell us what Skillet is and what form of music you do, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. Skillet is a Christian rock band formed back in 1996. So we've been touring for a long, long, long time. We do general market music. So we go do active rock tours that are not Christian tours. And then, of course, we do Christian touring as well. So our base is very broad. The goal always has been evangelistic. We love Jesus. We want to get that message out there. And so we do music.
And you're also a wife and a mom. You happen to be married to someone in the band, which is handy. And you've got kiddos. Tell us about that portion of your life.
Yes, I am married to the lead singer and songwriter for Skillet. And we got married, pretty young. He was 21, I was 24, and Skillet got signed shortly after that. And we both kind of decided, we don't feel like we have grace to do that thing where we're separated. I wasn't in the band to start with. And so I just jumped in the van and sold merchandise, and, we just wanted to be together. So that's kind of about our story. We've been together 24/7 for pretty much our whole marriage, 23 years, I think it is.
Wow.
He would know more than me, which is funny. But yeah. And so we had kids on the road. My daughter is 16. My son is turning 14 in a couple of days. And so they've been on the road since they were little babies, down at the bottom of my bunk through the night and just living life, figuring it out on the road together in a little bus.
Korey, that's amazing. And, Skillet has a reputation as being one of the most touring bands out there. I mean, just, that you guys are on the road a ton. So
yes.
Tell me first, what is it like to work with your spouse? Because I know spouses who work together in a variety of settings, whether that is a more traditional looking business, in an office suite, or things of your nature where you're on the road and traveling together. What has that been like for y'all? Because there's no leaving the office and coming back into family life. There's not that division, at least in terms of just the practical, get in the car and commute home. So how do you create those spaces? How does it all work?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy because, like you said, we're on 24/7. We own the band. We write for the band. We produce for the band. The business side never stops, even when the touring side does, which we tour, we're gone over 200 plus dates a year. So it's crazy. And so I think it's just a matter of kind of knowing your role and your place for the different things that are going on. For example, in the band, I play rhythm guitar. So I'm like, okay, I'm a player in the band. He's the boss. So if he has suggestions, I'm not taking that as husband, wife necessarily. I'm like, all right, he's my boss. This is what he wants me to do. And then when we're writing together, writing together is a vulnerable process because you're kind of putting yourself out there. And when you're familiar, you might be nicer sometimes to people you don't know as well. If they throw out an idea that you don't like.
It's true.
But with your spouse, you throw out an idea and I'm like, I don't really love that so much. It can go south just depending on what's going on. So we've learned to work through a lot of things because we're always together 24/7. And then we're always living with people too. So though Skillet does have two buses, our bus is pretty much the family bus with our drummer, who's a girl. She's with us too, but you're pretty much always working out your stuff in front of people, which isn't the best, but maybe you learn to do it in a more civil way than you would if it was just the two of you, because you're like, oh gosh, this is just in front of everyone. I don't want to be a bad example. And, you can control some of your emotions maybe a little bit better because people are always around. But then you don't necessarily always have the intimacy of, well, even when we're alone, we're getting questions. Yeah, and running business. So maybe we don't answer our phones for the next hour so that we can, go hang out. Or we have dates like we just both went to the dentist together. So sometimes it's the most alone time we have is on that car ride over there, the 15 minutes over, which is, I don't know. It works. It works well.
There, dental floss can be romantic, Korey. I got to tell you. I mean, shared
dental floss,
shared dental chair. It can be magical, if you just think through it enough. No, I think you're right. I think when we do have to work out stuff and there are other people watching, in a funny way, Michael and I, my husband and I have 8 kids, and it's even though we're not in business together, and he's gone more traditionally during the day. I office from home 3 days a week. It is interesting that we've had to learn that dynamic of, I don't know, almost like a greater etiquette, because we're having to work out stuff in front of a whole audience as well.
Right.
And there are things about it that are good. There are things that gate it well. And then there are things you're like, I don't know if that was like exactly completely how I feel, but
yes.
just kind of process.
Because it's that person that's most intimate with you, you want to really be understood on a level that maybe, it's okay if you're not understood on this emotional level where you just, throw a dagger because you feel like they should understand, or you feel like they should see, like, maybe I should do this. I could do this in a more civil way as well because I love him the most,
right.
And sometimes he gets the worst from me because I feel like he should know me. It feels like it should be such a safe place that you can just throw out all your ugly. And that's not necessarily the best thing.
Right. I do think we have in the American construct that, supposedly the person we're the most in love with is the person we're supposed to be what we call vulnerable. But sometimes in that dynamic, it can be the place where we're just throwing, we're throwing down. And you're right. I think to really have that pause is such a powerful thing. And of course, Mike and I are in that zone too, that we get interrupted sometimes in these vigorous discussions. And then we can't remember actually what we were fighting about, which has its own grace.
Totally.
It's like, I guess it wasn't that big a deal if I can't remember what the initial argument was about.
It's the dumbest thing that sets you off, and you're like, I don't really even know what's happening anymore, but,
right.
I love you.
Yeah,
so.
Here it is. Yeah. I love hearing the dynamic that you have on stage, working the band as a business. It reminds me of an interview that I had with Sam and Kevin Sorbo, who are actors and writers and directors. And I asked them, how do you navigate that when you're on set? And they said, on some films, she's the director, I'm the producer. In other films, she's the producer and director. And we honor those roles on set. I thought that was really interesting, and a unique strategy that I think generally our marriages would benefit from is actually clarifying what's expected of who. Do you find that to be true?
Yes, I think it's super helpful. I mean, a lot of what I do for Skillet is more on the production side. So when we're writing, I do a lot of the music that you hear that goes with the writing. So, keyboards, string arrangements, drum loops, all that kind of stuff is me. But I know that I'm coming in to serve John's vision because ultimately Skillet is kind of his baby. So yes, we do it together, but I know I'm coming in to serve his vision. So sometimes I have to push a little. I think this will make it better, but you're not hearing it or seeing it yet. So I'll push a little, and then knowing when to push and when to back off. And my security is not tied into him telling me no or yes on my music. Right. My security is in what I do, and I feel secure in our relationship. But if there was ego in it, I think the more ego you can get out of it, especially on the work level, the better it is. I'm here to serve, and I want this to be the best it can be. And ultimately, I'm serving your vision, even though we all throw in our strengths,
Right. Now, tell me with Skillet, because it is this rock genre, and I don't know that we see this as much anymore, but you're going to be able to speak to this better than I can. There was a period of time where people were really opposed to certain styles of music being used in a Christian format, and we had this really interesting sort of felt definition of what was sacred and what wasn't, and what crossed the line, and what was pop that was fine, but rock and roll that wasn't. So kind of catch me up on what you have seen during these years and where you think things live today when it comes to genre.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because John grew up in the Bible Belt in a very strict Southern Baptist upbringing, and his family, really did believe that rock and roll music was from the devil. But we both got saved, became born again when we were 5 years old. But I'm from up north. And so for me, I didn't even know it was a thing. Right. I just thought, well, I don't know. I feel called to serve God with music. I don't really care what style, because we're communicating a message, and hopefully the Holy Spirit will be working through our music. Music is such a powerful force, even without the lyric. So I'm kind of like, I didn't even know it was a thing. So I was a little bit oblivious to that rock and roll music is from the devil still existed.
Right.
So I kind of was naive at the beginning of Skillet, thinking, oh no, it doesn't matter how you dress, outside of obviously modesty and those sorts of things for women. But as far as like wearing black clothes or, having your hair be messy, I didn't really think that Christians would have a problem with those things. Yeah. We had like albums early on where we had pictures of us on the cover, and they wouldn't carry it in certain Christian stores because the picture was, I guess it was too rock, it was too something that they weren't used to, which was funny because at the time, the style that we were was very in style in the world.
Broadly,
so I'm like, you look like the world, you're wolves in sheep's clothing. Like, we'll get all that kind of stuff. Even now when we tour we do general market tours because we are played on active rock, stations. So we do tour with bands that are not Christians, and we still will get like, well, I'm not coming, I'm boycotting because I thought you were a Christian, but you're touring with a band who's not a Christian. I'm kind of like, oh, that still is out there. But I think that within the church over the last, 20 years, people are beginning to realize that, this is about being Jesus to the world, being a light to the world. We are a light in the world. We are salt and light. So why would we not want to get out there? And I feel like some people are called to be out there, and some people are called to just minister within the church. And I think that's a great calling too, and necessary. But for us, we feel called to be out there. To me, regardless of a drum beat, or if the guitar has distortion on it. I mean, those aren't really biblical reasons to judge someone's Christianity. Right. It's about your heart and the fruit of your life. And, those things for us, hopefully the fruit of our life speaks of the kingdom of God. And that's what we want, And
I do think that there are those, we have friends in the music industry who are strong believers, but don't do quote unquote Christian music, and have received a lot of pushback from people from time to time. Well, you're not being a witness, you're not all this kind of stuff. And yet I've certainly seen in the arc of their career, the influence that they've been able to have, even when people don't even really know kind of what their faith is, but you see people drawn to that. And my husband is in the secular, if you will, secular work world in finance. And I'm telling you, it is so wild, Korey, because I feel like he has more of an opportunity many times to evangelize far beyond what I do, and I'm in full-time ministry. But, he's able to really be connected in a way that sometimes being in the fishbowl of the church, the fishbowl we love, but you just don't get those same kind of opportunities. I find it so compelling that you do these general market tours. I think that's amazing. What kind of response do you see being on the road like that? Either people who are coming to see you because they know your ministry, or people who may not have heard of you or don't identify you necessarily as a Christian band. Talk about what that response is when they get to see you in that format with bands that don't profess to know Christ, and then there's you guys.
Sure. It's funny. Most of what you do when you're on the road is not on stage. It's living life behind the scenes. And so it's funny, when we first started doing general market rock touring, because we'd been around for so long, everybody knew we were a Christian band, but over there, they don't really know what that means.
Right.
So you have all the baggage of any experience, good or bad, that they've had with the church or a Christian. So you come in and they're like, oh, you're wearing black. I thought that was like from the devil. So you have those people. You have people that have seen us play because they grew up in youth group. Right. So there are always those people. Inevitably, some of the bands we tour with grew up in youth group, probably saw Skillet play at their youth group. The active rock world is a really dark place. So a lot of these people have gotten as far away from God as they can, and then we show up. So it's like, it's a little bit of like an invasion. And it's funny because of our family dynamic as well. And like I was saying earlier, we are salt and light. It's not something we try to be. It's just
who you are.
The facts. Mm-hmm. So you come in, and John and I are married. So already that's like weird for people, because usually a lead singer, even if bands have married people, they try to keep it on the DL because it doesn't sell as well, whatever. Right. My husband's a lead singer and of this rock band, but he's married, and then our kids show up, and our kids are really well behaved and kind and caring, and they'll pray for people on the road, and so people are like, I don't really know what to do with this family dynamic, because to them it really stands out, because they're not used to a family that gets along, with kids that do well. Our drummer is a girl, so we have another girl in the band, and she's one of my best friends. People aren't used to seeing that dynamic either, because they're kind of like, they should be in competition with each other. So just bringing the kingdom of God to these places, people really love it, even though it's unnerving to them, because they feel like you're going to judge them, or if you're a Christian, you have an agenda to see them saved because it'll give you like bonus points when you get to heaven or something. But to genuinely care about someone without an agenda really goes such a long way, to love them like Jesus did.
Right.
Usually within 2 weeks of being on a tour, we'll have people approaching us, asking us about our faith, as opposed to us just beating them down with it.
Right.
And then the dynamic, of course, of the stage when you get up there. Active rock tours, like I said, they're dark places. So some of them, my kids will play with them backstage, because most of them are real nice people. But then I won't allow my kids to watch some of them, because it's either really dirty or there's so much swearing you can't even believe it. So then when we get up on stage, following those acts, there's a noticeable difference. And we always believe that, the Holy Spirit is anointing us as we go up as well. So sometimes we've heard testimonies of people who have gotten saved just listening, and they just, email, hey, I heard this song, you guys are playing it, and I heard a voice tell me I needed to give my life to Jesus. We're like, wow. And it'll be a song, we have a song called Monster. It'll be a song that really, there's nothing in it that is the gospel. It's not contradictory, but those things, God moves, and in spite of, everything else, God will move and touch people's hearts. So yes, it changes the atmosphere when we come up there on rock tours, for sure.
I think that's so powerful. And, we've had Bob Goff on the show, and he was pointing out that in Love Does, he doesn't actually mention specific scriptures, which really throws some people, right?
Sure.
But it's so full of truth, and it's so full of those things that resonate. And he can tell you in his annotated copy exactly what he's referring to in terms of scripture. And sometimes he gets criticism for the fact that it doesn't, Colossians 2, he gets criticism.
Exactly.
But you hear the testimonies of people who pick up that book who really, all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit is resonating within them, and they don't even really completely understand why. It's really profound. And so I think when we can let go of some of these things where we get a little spooled up about what we designate as Christian or not, and we really take a look at how God can use it, it's so fascinating, some of the stories that come out of that. Back with my new bestie, Korey Cooper, in just a moment. How do you want to be remembered? I've thought about this a lot lately, and it's a little complicated to answer. I want people to remember me for the way I loved them, or that I was always up for a heart-to-heart conversation. But if you look at how I'm really spending my days, you'd find a big focus on plain old busy. Sometimes the things that seem to take up our time or focus aren't actually the things that are most important. And that's why I'd love for you to check out my newest Bible study from Abington Women called Footnotes. It's an exploration of 4 people we find in the Bible, people just like you and me, who end up being remembered for some things in their lives that they might have thought weren't all that important or influential, but in the bigger scheme of things, were. How do you want to be remembered? Check out Footnotes wherever you buy your books, or at abingtonwomen.com/footnotes. Now, you alluded to before that you've got a chick drummer, and then there's you.
Yes.
But you're primarily in a pretty male-dominated industry, really, within this genre of music. What has that experience been like for you?
It's a little bit to me like what I was saying as far as my naivety about rock music and Christians not loving that sometimes,
Right.
I think that even all growing up, I never necessarily categorized limits for myself because I was female. And even in reading the Bible, most of my heroes were males, and I never thought, well, I can't actually do exploits for God because I'm a female. So even in getting in the rock world, I'm like, yeah, cool, okay. I'm just going to get up there and rock. I mean, when I started, it was all male except for a few singers, so
right.
There would be women fronted bands. And then when we started touring, it was like, oh, okay, I've got to step up my game and I've got to rock harder than the guys because I'm automatically disqualified just from holding my guitar. They're like, yeah, she's going to not be aggressive. She's
girl
gonna
guitar,
not be a great
girl
player
guitar, yeah.
Girl guitar, yeah. Or do you play the tambourine? That was because I'm married to the lead singer too. So is that your role to play the tambourine, the token member? I'm
right.
like, okay, so I'm gonna have to really step up my game and my stage performance and not look like a girl, as they say. Play like a girl.
Right. Run like a girl, whatever the phrase is. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And I do think, it's interesting. I myself have been in 2 different, predominantly male dominated industries, one being in radio and television, at least the way it was a couple decades ago, and then also in vocational ministry. And I do think you're right. I have always felt that I had to show up bigger, better prepared, more memorized, all the things, that was really important, because if I was going to get that chance to be on whatever that platform was, I was going to be somewhat judged for the fact I was female, and that I really needed to bring it. Do you feel like that's beginning to change now for you as you look at the arc of the career that you've had with Skillet, or do you still find that it's a dynamic that you see playing out?
I think it's definitely changed. It used to be kind of a strike against us. Even getting played on radio, it was like, there's a girl singer, there's a girl on guitar, I don't know. And now it's actually working in our favor because it's such a girl power season, which I'm not complaining about. If it could work in my favor, that's fine with me. Yeah. I feel like I've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and if now it's going to work for us, that's great,
You put in the time, you put in the heart, you put in the effort.
That's
hey,
right,
it's all good.
right.
If it's going to start yielding, awesome. Now, talk to me about mom life on the road, because, 200 dates a year and 2 kids, that math is pretty impressive. So how has it worked? I mean, how do you emulate home life and yet you're on the road?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of it is pretty crazy. And John and I, when we first got married, we were like, we're never going to have kids on a road. That was kind of like, it didn't seem fair for the kids. And then God started to speak other things. And so we were like, okay, John started having dreams that we were having a baby. He started getting excited about us having a baby. And I was like, nah. And then we had a lot of other people that were like, oh, I had a dream you guys had a baby. So it happened so much that I was like, I don't even need to pray about this. This is clearly the Lord. So I'm like, all right, if this is something the Lord is calling, like if it's time now for my daughter Alex to be in the world and this is the vehicle he wants to, this is how he wants her to be raised, then that's great. And we prayed about it. I pray about it often. I revisit it because it's not like, oh, I'm so living my dream that, I'm not going to sacrifice anything. I would be happy to get off the road and just be with the kids and raise them. But we don't feel like that's what God's called us to do. So we're like, okay, then God will give us the grace, in our obedience and our faith. God will give us the grace. And these will be the experiences that these particular kids that he's destined them to have to shape who they are. So we do try to have a bit of for a rock band, we have a regimented schedule. So like my kids do school and the bus, they're usually up by 8 a.m., which is early for, road life.
Right.
And we've got a nanny who oversees their schooling. So she's out with us, or when they stay home, she's with them. And then they start school usually by 9. So the front lounge is pretty much school area. And then John and I get up fairly early as well, and we start working on music and writing and demoing. So, and then we have time with them in the afternoon typically. And then we start our working shortly after that. So usually after dinner, we do meet and greets and then get ready for show, play the show, come back. And now that they're getting older, they're usually awake when we're back. My daughter has started kind of helping out on the road. So she's the assistant to the tour manager when she's out. And they really do enjoy tour life. But we are a lot more scheduled and regimented than most rock bands.
Right, typical. Yeah, I was talking with Megan Garrett of Casting Crowns, and she's got 3 of her kids on the road with her. And her husband, he works as a youth pastor, I believe. And so they kind of have a different dynamic in terms of how they're doing things. But her kids have been raised on the road. And right. Just the rhythm of that, yes, making some accommodations to create some kind of routine to that is important. But at the same time, man, the beauty of that kind of experience for kids, that it can be different and unusual. And sometimes I think we a little bit overestimate trying to give our kids a typical childhood, particularly in the world we live in today. Does that resonate with you? Do you feel that way?
That resonates with me, yeah. I mean, I understand, in theory, wanting to be fair to your kids and wanting to give them all the opportunities, but like I said, I felt this is what God had for them. And so, by us being obedient to what God has, we are honoring him and we're living in faith, because I think a lot of times you can live in fear with your kids, like, right. Oh, well, they're missing out on opportunities, or, they're never going to be able to develop this skill because they can't play sports, or, all the stuff that we can as moms, like we want to give them every opportunity and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to live in fear because I'm certain that this is where God has called us to be. Therefore, it's where he's called them to be as well. And he can use them just as much as me here in this place, and will be shaping them in this place. And if I'm not in a place of faith, then I'm in a place of disobedience. So that's certainly not where I want to raise my kids, Right. So I'm like, okay, this is where they're called to be. I have faith for that. And those are things I fight for, that faith in my heart, because I don't want to be fearing and I don't want to be anxious as a mom. I want to be like, all right, I'm at peace that this is where God has them. And so he'll shape them. He'll give them the opportunities that they need to shape who they are in him,
Absolutely. You said something really profound in there, which is being obedient to God, even though it looks different for your kids than it might look in other venues or how other people do it. And I think that's one of those big acts of courage that is tough for moms. We think there's some kind of proven model out there, if we have them in exactly the right educational system, and if we have them in exactly the right neighborhood and exactly the right extracurricular activities, that somehow it's going to guarantee us some kind of success with our kids. But you're so right. It's that obedience to the kids that God's given you, the way he has a life mapped for them. And it may not look like your next door neighbors or your sister-in-laws,
And, you're going to make mistakes as a parent, but when you're walking in faith and obedience, his grace covers all that stuff. The other thing I always remember is that God is more concerned for my kids than I am, which is, it's hard to believe. That sounds dumb, but, he actually loves them and is more concerned for them than I am. And he's got them in his hands. And so those are also always the things that I speak to myself if I start to get anxious or about, my kids or where they are, their place in life, or if I'm being fair or their experiences. I'm like, what, God's in control of this. And as long as they're in his hands, they're in the best place they possibly can be. And he will develop them the way that he wants them to be. He'll shape them.
Absolutely.
And as parents, that is our job, to shape our kids as well and to give them boundaries and definition and identity. And so, of course, as a parent, that is what I want to do. That is what I strive to do. But I'm always striving to enter that place of rest, knowing they're ultimately in God's hands. And he's way more concerned with these things than I am.
Absolutely. And I just think they're going to be such amazing stories. Your kids come away from this experience of life on the road that is going to pay forward into their futures. I think it's going to be amazing. Now, you have had Grammy nominated albums and you've got a new album coming out called Victorious. What was the process for putting this one together? And how do you begin the writing process when it comes to these albums?
Right. Well, we pretty much never stop writing because by the time you finish an album, it's almost time to start another one.
Start the next one.
So we write a lot on the road. John and I, this is the first time we've produced an album. So there were a couple other producers on a couple songs, but overall we did this one. So that was new in this process, even though it felt, similar to a lot of things that we do. But when you're the producer, you're kind of the final say as far as the steering of the song and the writing. So we have not wanted that role before because we wanted to make sure that there was an objective person, because when you're writing, you're not necessarily objective. It's your art and whatever. But right. I think we felt like this time we know what our fans like from us. We know how far we can veer because we always like to reinvent ourselves. We know how far we can veer. We think that they still will be accepting of. And so that was new in this process as far as that. And then as far as the day-to-day, when my kids do school, we just write. So we'll go in the back lounge. I'll set up my laptop. We write music, and with each album, you're always praying about what's the message, what's the emphasis. My husband is really great at sort of cultural studies, and our demographic skews young, so we're kind of always trying to keep in touch with where young people are at. And now that we have, 16 and 14-year-olds,
right,
that helps too, because they can help keep you in touch with like the lingo, the things kids are going through, because we want to communicate the gospel. We want to communicate our paradigms in a way that people can hear it.
Right.
So that's another thing, like you were talking about Love Does with Bob Goff. In some contexts, you can really spell it out clearly. And I think in the Christian world can sometimes be a little bit of a bubble where we have our own lingo, we have our own vocabulary. But in the world at large, they don't really know what we're talking about. And so when we write, a lot of times our lyrics might be in parables. Like we have fans that are atheists that like how the music makes them feel. It's uplifting. So we want to write music that everybody can relate to, not just Christians, but we also want it to be an encouragement to Christians. So, we always pray about what's the direction. I think on this one, we kind of felt like the overarching message is that life can be hard. In our culture, we don't like to admit that life can be hard. We don't like to talk about pain or trials. We like to shelter our kids from, anything like that. And life is just good and everything is awesome. And, we have Instagram and you can put a filter on everything. So everybody looks amazing. And I think the perception can be that I'm the only one that has problems, or I'm the only one who has flaws, or I'm the only one who has troubles. And kids are feeling more and more alone. Even though we're more connected than we've ever been as far as social media, people are feeling more alone than ever because they're not able to make connections in real life.
Right.
And so part of the message of this album is, it's called Victorious. So yes, we can be victorious, but it's going to be, part of your growth as a person is in the trials that you face and facing them. And knowing that within the hard times, and life can throw you some hard things, within the hard times that God is there and there's hope and that you're not alone, but that you might have to fight through. And that's okay because that's part of life is fighting through. And within it, you can be victorious.
I love that. And, you're so right on in that parables are such a powerful way for people to learn. It really is something that, whether it's through music, through a visual piece of art, when we can tell stories well about redemption, about love, about acceptance, about how to be victorious in life, I think that just speaks so powerfully. And to that end, you guys also have a graphic novel that I think is going to be this really powerful parable narrative that continues forth. So for our listeners who don't know what a graphic novel is, tell them what that is, and then tell us the core message of Eden.
Okay, yes. So I didn't really know what graphic novels were either. We got a call from this company, and my husband we have Batman, Spider-Man, all over my house are, comics. He loves comics.
Right.
So I just thought, okay, it's kind of like graphic novels, kind of like a comic book that's a little bit longer. That's how, if somebody doesn't know, that's how I would describe it. Both my husband and I love sci-fi, and a lot of the times in sci-fi, there's sort of that sense of something spiritual, that sense of like, I'm called for something greater, and I don't know what that is. And so it's a great story of redemption, but yes, in parable form, so other people will be able to relate to it, but there's such a strong message of kingdom. And you know how in Ecclesiastes it talks about there's eternity in the heart of man, you can't understand it. That sense of yearning of like, there's something greater that I'm called to do, or there's something greater that's out there that I want to be a part of, but I don't know how and I don't know what it is. So I think this comic book sort of speaks to that journey, There's a lot of other parallels in there of, the elect or the chosen, or is this for everybody, some other theological themes. But John was one of the primary writers, but it was also written with a guy who's not a Christian at all, but he kind of understood what we were going for. And it's really cool. It's really moving. There's going to be a song released special with the graphic novel, so we just got the mix in for that, just finished that. So there's a lot of exciting things going on. It's
so cool. I can't wait to get my eyes on it because I'm excited to see it. It's going to be really a cool way to continue to communicate and to build out what your mission is. I'm just thrilled. Korey Cooper, so great to get to connect and to get to chat. I just love hearing about the amazing things that are going on and the way that you are living out your faith in a way that some people might feel is, not exactly as typical as some of the platforms we're accustomed to. But wow, what an incredible ride, and the places and the people you're encountering. It's just incredible.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Head over to the show notes for links and more content from the episode today. And while you're on the interwebs, be sure and check out AllMomDoes, an awesome resource and community for the season of life you're in. Come say hi to me on the socials. I particularly seem to hang out at Instagram, and I'm Julie Lyles Carr there. It's so great to get to connect with you on the grams. I just love it when you come and I get to hear from you and hear about your favorite episodes and what's going on in your life and who you'd like to see as a guest. So head to the grams and tell me hi. A big thank you to Rebecca, our content coordinator, and Donna, our producer. I'm so blessed to work with these two amazing women who get the episodes out each week. Be sure and subscribe and share and leave a 5-star rating and review wherever you get your podcasts. That's the best thanks you can give our team. It really helps get the word out about the podcast. I'll see you next time on the Modern Motherhood Podcast.